You've spelunked into the Matt Cave. Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Matt Cave. Thank you all so much for spelunking on by this week. 2 words for you as we start. Told you. How about 3? Told you so. Or another 2. Called it. The Chiefs win Super Bowl 57. I think that's the one we're on. 57 over the Philadelphia Eagles, 38-35 on a last-minute field goal from Harrison Butker, and then a pathetic 30-yard heave-ho from Jalen Hurts to close out a couple of things. I'll talk about that here in a little bit. Also, this past week, we had the trade deadline, and boy, was it nutty. I'm going to go over basically the blockbuster and then the other, not necessarily blockbuster, but big trade that happened. There was a ton more, and if this was a basketball podcast, I would go over all of them. But as it stands, we're not a basketball podcast, so it'll be the big ones. And then that'll probably be the show. I've got a lot to talk about. There's going to be some NFL offseason starting gate stuff for you as well. A couple of storylines that picked up on Super Bowl Sunday. So I'll go over that as well. But first, as always, thank you all so much for being here. Please rate, review, like, subscribe, whatever it is, wherever you're listening. Please do that for me. I would greatly appreciate it. And it really helps out a ton. Like I've said many times, I want to do this for a living, and I can only do that with the help of my friends. And those are you spelunkers. So please do what you can. I appreciate you. All right. Super Bowl 57, Kansas City versus Philadelphia. All of the talk coming in was about Philly. It was all about the Eagles. It was that, they were just they had the better season. They're the more complete team. They have the better offensive and defensive line. You know what they don't have? You know what Philadelphia does not have? First, the heart of a champion. On the Eagles team, left remaining from that team that won the Super Bowl 5 years ago, was about 5 players. You had Brandon Graham, Jason Kelce, Fletcher Cox, TJ Edwards, and I want to say Dallas Goedert, but I think he was drafted right after the Super Bowl, so I'm not sure on that one. But really, and Lane Johnson, that's the other one. Those were the players, right? Those were the people that were on that team, and really, I was only rooting for 3 of those guys anymore. It was Jason Kelce. I love Jason Kelce. Hall of Fame center, probably one of the best centers of all time. All time. I'm a big fan of Brandon Graham and everything he's gone through in his career. He came back from a devastating Achilles tear in his age 34 or 35 season to come back and have the best season of his career. And Fletcher Cox, one of just the nicest guys in the NFL. So those were really the only 3 guys I was rooting for. I didn't really care about the rest of the team. I'm not a big fan of Jalen Hurts. I've been saying that. I will eat crow. So a very heaping helping of crow was served to me tonight. Jalen Hurts was outstanding. He was. Nothing he did. There was only 2 questionable things he did. Oh, well, 3. There was 3 questionable things that Jalen Hurts did in this game. Otherwise, he had an outstanding game. If the Eagles won, he would have been Super Bowl MVP. So the 3 things he did, obviously, first was the fumble that he was trying to change hands with the ball. It just came out and oopsie-doopsie. The other 2 were 2 deep throws he should not have thrown, both of which should have been intercepted, if not for his receivers doing great things to break up the play. So those were the really only boneheaded things. What makes it magnified, not just because it's a Super Bowl, it's magnified because the guy across from you is the guy who beat you out for MVP. And he didn't make those boneheaded mistakes. And he won the game. So Jalen Hurts knows what he needs to do to be better. Can he get there? I don't think so. I don't think he's on the same level as Pat Mahomes, which is fine to say. How many players are on the level of Pat Mahomes right now? Can you name any? That pause was me waiting for you to name some. I'll name a couple for you. First being Aaron Rodgers. Yes, I know Aaron Rodgers is kind of overrated. I get it. I do. I understand. But the stuff that he can do, the flick of a wrist and the ball goes 70 yards, give me a break. So, yes, Aaron Rodgers is on his level. Tom Brady, obviously, Tom Brady's on his own level, so not even Patrick Mahomes is there yet. But you can put Tom Brady there, but he's now retired. He filed his paperwork, so it is official. He did not do that last time, which is why a mundane task such as filing your retirement papers became a newsworthy thing, is because Tom Brady actually filed them this time. And he did it pretty quick. So it would have been Tom Brady if he was still around. And that's about it. There's not another Super Bowl winning quarterback out there, really, because of Tom Brady retiring. And Ben Roethlisberger's now retired. I mean, the main Super Bowl winning quarterbacks in the past have been what? Matthew Stafford, who is a great quarterback in his own right, but he's probably on the same level as Jalen Hurts, not Patrick Mahomes. So all of that to say Patrick Mahomes is on his own level. He's just that good. And by the way, yes, he still did have a high ankle sprain. No, he was not faking it when he got up from that tackle late in the first half. And if he was faking it, it worked, because the Eagles played him differently in the second half. They did. So those three boneheaded moves by Jalen Hurts cost them the Super Bowl, in my opinion. So I will eat crow. Yes, Jalen Hurts is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. He is. From what I saw tonight, he absolutely is in that echelon. The Eagles have their quarterback of the future in him, and that's that, really, when it comes to the Eagles. Next, it was a coaching clinic in the second half because of the adjustments that the Eagles coaching staff made, which were not any from what I could tell. And the Chiefs just coached circles around the Eagles. Andy Reid, Hall of Fame coach. Lock it in. One of the best all time now. He has 2 Super Bowl rings. He has the record for most wins on 2 franchises. He has the most wins for the Eagles. He has the most wins now for the Chiefs. After beating the Eagles in the Super Bowl, Andy Reid now holds the record for the most wins by a head coach for the Kansas City Chiefs franchise. And that's a franchise that goes back a very long way. Hank Schramm. That's a deep cut for a lot of you youngins out there. But Hank Schramm, if you've ever heard we're matriculating the ball down the field, that was Hank Schramm of the old school 1960s Chiefs that were in the American Football League Championship constantly against the Raiders and other teams. That was him, and he's a Hall of Fame coach in his own right. So Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy, and Steve Spagnuolo. Eric Bieniemy should have been a head coach of a football team about 3, 4, 5 years ago, and Steve Spagnuolo used to be a head coach. He doesn't want to be anymore. He signed an extension with the Chiefs to remain their defensive coordinator with Andy Reid. They just coached circles around Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen, and whoever the defensive coordinator is for the Eagles. I don't know him off the top of my head. You think I would, because I'm an Eagles fan. Maybe. And the second half just proved that out. Pat Mahomes proved he's a better quarterback than Jalen Hurts. Travis Kelce proved he's a better receiver than everybody on the Eagles. And the Chiefs' defense proved they were a better unit than the Eagles' unit. There's better individual talent on the Eagles. Yes, across the board, better individual talent, except for in 2 positions, tight end and quarterback. The Eagles have the talent everywhere else, but they don't have the talent in those 2 positions. Those were the 2 positions that killed them. They don't have the better talent when it comes to coaching either, and it bore itself out. So coming into the game, it was the Eagles. Everybody was on the Eagles. It was Eagles this, Eagles that. Jalen Hurts should have won the MVP. He was overlooked. Nick Sirianni should have won Coach of the Year. He was overlooked. Blah, 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 blah. Like I said on my appearance on Radio Ronan, the Eagles never ran into a team like the Chiefs. Throughout the season, they never ran into a coaching staff like the coaching staff the Chiefs have. They never ran into a quarterback like Pat Mahomes, and they never ran into a tight end like Travis Kelce. And they never ran into an offensive and defensive lines like the Chiefs have. Throughout the season, there was nothing similar. The Chiefs have run into teams like the Eagles. They've run into teams that are more explosive than the Eagles, and they beat them. So I don't understand what all of that talk was about the Eagles. I said on Radio Ronan, no, it's not going to be an Eagles walkover, and the Eagles aren't going to win. Chiefs are going to win. And they did. I had the Chiefs, as soon as they won the AFC Championship, I had the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl. And they won. So there you go. That's my I told you so moment. Moving forward, the Chiefs, as long as Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes are together, I don't see them going away. I don't think it's going to be a Bill Belichick, Tom Brady partnership for 20 years. I don't think that's ever going to happen again. But it's going to be something like the 49ers of the 80s where they're always going to be there. They're always going to be in the playoffs, and there's going to be teams that spike up like the Bills or the Bengals, like the 49ers had the Cowboys and the Redskins, now the Commanders, I guess. But they're always going to be there. That's the Chiefs. That's this current state of affairs. Pat Mahomes is the new face of the NFL with Tom Brady retiring and with Aaron Rodgers kind of going cuckoo. So that's where we're standing. Pat Mahomes, I can't say enough about him. It's just, even with a high ankle sprain, the dude scrambled for 30-something yards at the most important juncture in 2 championship-level games. He makes throws that are nearly impossible throws. One throw I want to just kind of call out that the crew, which I'll get to the cast crew here in a little bit, believe you me, but one throw I want to point out in particular that everybody just kind of thought was a mundane throw, that is something that a very small percentage of quarterbacks can make. And it was towards the beginning of that final drive the Chiefs had. And it was from Patrick Mahomes on the far hash mark, throwing a dart to Juju Smith-Schuster on the opposite side of the field for Juju to get about 8 or 9 yards. See, that throw is not possible. Jalen Hurts would not make that throw. If you look at the Eagles and their play calling, a throw like that isn't in their playbook. Jalen Hurts would throw that near hash to the near sideline. He wouldn't throw it far hash to the far sideline. It wouldn't work that way. And, I mean, Patrick Mahomes did it, and because it's Patrick Mahomes, it's mundane. They can gloss over it. Oh, my goodness. Like, that's how good he is. And then how smart Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy are. Two of those touchdowns for Pat Mahomes were off of motion plays where throughout the entire season in playoffs, those receivers in motion went all the way across the field, and it would have been a wide receiver bubble screen with the momentum of the player and into the end zone. That's the normal play. Why it looked so easy is because nobody does what the Chiefs did in those 2 plays. With Kadarius Toney motioning to the left, to the far side of the field from the camera, and then stopping and then turning and going back. That confused the defense. The defense never seen that before. And that's why he was able to just walk into the end zone. And then it happened again just with a different player on the opposite side of the field in Sky Moore. That's the kind of play design that the Eagles were up against, and they were just outmatched. The Eagles coaching staff could not hold a candle to what the Chiefs were doing. And it showed out in the most important spots of the game. Then there was the penalties. The Eagles had more penalties than the Chiefs in key moments. That call at the end of the game, that pass interference call or defensive holding against James Bradbury, that was a makeup call from a clearly missed call earlier in the game. Do I agree with the makeup call? No. But Eagles fans are going to say the referees handed the game to the Chiefs. That's incorrect. You were already out of timeouts at that point. The Chiefs were always going to kick a field goal to go ahead. It's just a matter of how much time was left on the clock. And do you really believe that this offense, this Eagles offense that is predicated on running the ball and short in routes to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, who will hopefully break a tackle and break one, with the occasional deep ball that's a little misthrown from the quarterback that the wide receiver has to make an amazing play to make? Do you really think in the biggest moment, your quarterback, your coach, and your team is capable of doing that on the biggest stage in about 62 seconds? With the second best defensive line in football bearing down on you, knowing it's passing all the way, it's a passing play. I don't think so. But Eagles fans are Eagles fans, and they're going to be screaming from the rooftops that the referees gave this game to the Chiefs. And when the referees were introduced at the beginning of the game, the people that were booing the referees were Eagles fans. Those were Eagles fans booing the referees. We're all human here. I'm not saying that influenced what the referees did during the game, but maybe it did. We're all human. So, This was an all-time Super Bowl. I think it was absolutely great. It was never boring. Both teams were going up and down the field. The defenses were present. They were making plays. It wasn't like it was one of the old whack shootouts from the 80s where it was BYU and Utah scoring 70 points a game. No, it wasn't that. There was still enough defense and there was still enough, chess match going on that this game was very fun to watch. As for the commercials, I don't know. I'll leave that up to another podcast. I think the Ronin are going to rate the commercials for the Super Bowl, maybe. So go listen to them for that. That's not me. For me, this Super Bowl was great. I loved it. Everything that I said came true except for Jalen Hurts choking. Minus Jalen Hurts choking in this game, I called this game. I said the Eagles were going to get outcoached by Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy and Steve Spagnuolo. They were. I said Patrick Mahomes is going to prove why he's the MVP. He did. Travis Kelce is the all-time greatest tight end. I know I've been saying I prefer Tony Gonzalez because he created the position that Travis Kelce is now playing. So there's always going to be that back and forth for me between those two. But Travis Kelce is quite possibly the greatest tight end of his generation. And yes, that includes Rob Gronkowski. Because Travis Kelce already has more touchdown receptions in the playoffs than Rob Gronkowski ever has. Okay? And Travis Kelce still has a few more years left in him with the best quarterback in the league. And quite possibly the second best head coach in the league. We'll see what happens with Bill Belichick. If Bill Belichick keeps slipping and sliding the way he is with Mac Jones, maybe Andy Reid is the best coach in the NFL. Maybe he was more of Tom Brady than we thought it was, as opposed to Bill Belichick. Because post the Bill Belichick-Tom Brady marriage, it's Tom Brady 1, Bill Belichick 0. So there is that. I mean, there's not much more I can say about the Super Bowl. I've been going on about it for, 15 minutes here, but I really, 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 really enjoyed it. I really did. I thought it was a fun game. And it was a very good game. I'm gonna say it now. So, let's talk about the broadcast. So, one thing didn't happen that I told you was going to happen. And that is Kevin Burkhardt saying he's wide open. He never said that throughout the entire broadcast. I was stunned. I think somebody, a producer, a director, maybe another caster that he respects, got in his ear and said, you say this when they're not that. And in this game, you probably should take that out of your verbiage. And he listened. So kudos to him. Greg Olsen, I love Greg Olsen. I do. I love him to death. He's one of the all-time great people the NFL has ever had. But he's a caster for the football fan. He's not a caster in the way that Troy Aikman and John Madden, even Chris Collinsworth to a certain extent, are to someone who is not an NFL fan, but they just like to watch football. Because Greg Olsen throughout the game was telling people what these little intricacies are called. And as I was sitting there with my mom and my sister watching the game, and I just made an offhand comment saying, Greg, nobody cares what that's called. My mom and my sister both laughed in agreement. So I love Greg Olsen to death. He is great for the football fan. He's not great for the biggest stage. So we'll see how Tom Brady does. He comes in next year. We'll see how he does. But this Super Bowl, there was a couple of audio issues, like Tom Rinaldi got cut off completely for his halftime report. There could have been a better option, and I think the NFL is looking at this and going, ooh, that was not good at all. Let's think about not having Fox do it anymore after our contract with them ends. Honestly, it was that bad. All right, and now the thing I was kind of putting off and telling you about, this was a great game to send off my fandom of the Philadelphia Eagles. As I was watching this game, and as I was listening to how the fans were acting, I was listening kind of, but watching the mannerisms of the coaching staff on the sideline of the Eagles and kind of the mannerisms of a few of the players that are newer to Philadelphia and the Nick Sirianni regime, how they kind of mocked Patrick Mahomes as he was limping off the field at the end of the first half. I just can't root for that. It's not me. It's not what I want to root for. And I know you guys don't care about this, but it is a pretty big moment in my life. I've been rooting for the Eagles since Andy Reid in the year 2000 when they drafted Donovan McNabb. That's how long I've been rooting for the Eagles. So, 23 years now? 22? And before that, I was a Cowboys fan, believe it or not. But I was only a Cowboys fan because it irked my family members. Much in the same way that I was a University of Utah fan in my younger years because it irked my family members. I was that kid. I rooted for Michael Jordan because it irked my family members. During the NBA Finals, we had to go to a different room because of how I was acting when my family was screaming at Michael Jordan. I didn't like it, so I had to leave and watch the NBA Finals in a different room with my mom. God bless my mom. She let me root for whoever I wanted to root for. And now with seeing just how, and then I know how the Eagles fans are going to be reacting as, until next season kicks off and even through next season, and how they're going to be treating officials and referees. I can't do it anymore. I can't associate myself with that kind of toxicity. And then the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles constantly staring at the opposing team's head coach when something goes against the opposing team. Like they miss a field goal and Nick Sirianni is staring across at Andy Reid and doing the no good sign. Like, give me a break, dude. How old are you? Are you 12? Give me a break, man. And how he is constantly yelling at the referees, like yelling at them is going to make them do a different call. It's not. The coaches that are the most successful do not berate referees in the NFL. Now, I understand in college it happens all the time. Ryan Day, Nick Saban, the big guys at the big universities, they yell at the referees constantly. But if you look at the guys who have sustained success outside of Nick Saban, Kyle Whittingham, you look at Bronco Mendenhall was a great regular season coach. He won a bunch of games for BYU. So I'll throw him in there. And then on the NFL level, you got Bill Belichick, you got Andy Reid. I mean, you look at those guys, even, forgive me, I forget his name, Bruce Arians. Him too. They never were over there berating referees, screaming, throwing their headsets, always in their ear, telling them I know what the F I'm doing. They're over there having a conversation, understanding where the referees are coming from, why the referees made the call they made. And then they'll tell them and they'll shake their head and they say, I don't agree with that. I think that was a bad call. They walk away and they call the rest of the game. They don't constantly berate referees. Nick Sirianni is the other side of the coin. Constantly on the referee's ear, yelling, screaming, theatrics. Maybe it's to cover up that he's not a good coach. I don't know. But I can't anymore. So my fandom for the Philadelphia Eagles is dead at 22 years and some odd months. It would have been 2000, around May-ish through 2023, middle of February. I don't know. That's hard math and it's late. So I don't know. Let's call it 22 years and call it good. We had a good run. It was longer than my run with BYU. So there we go. I am now a free agent when it comes to fandom, although I'm about to sign with the 49ers because I love Fred Warner and George Kittle. I'm a big fan of Christian McCaffrey as well, and Debo. I like Debo. So, yeah, I think I'm going to be a 49ers fan, which works better for me too because I'm over on that side of the country. So it makes a little bit more sense. And one of the all-time greats for the 49ers happened to go to school here in the state of Utah, so that helps as well. I'm a 49ers fan. So, one last thing. I know I keep on saying one last thing, but this really is the last thing. I wore a jersey to watch the game today, and it's an Eagles jersey. So, yes, I was rooting for the Eagles, kind of. So, the name on the front says Eagles. The name on the back says Wentz. So, I'll leave it up to you, dear Spelunker, if I was actually rooting for the Eagles or not. I'll leave that up to you. All right. So that's enough about the Super Bowl, about 25 minutes worth of Super Bowl talk. Let's move on, shall we, to the NFL offseason starting gates. We are at the starting gate now. There were some juicy tidbits that came out in the news today, and the first starts in the city of New York with the New York Jets calling and officially asking the Packers if Aaron Rodgers is available, according to Jeremy Fowler of ESPN. He wrote a great article on ESPN.com about it, by the way. I'd encourage you to go read it. There was contribution from Rich Cimini, though, so take it with a grain of salt. Rich Cimini is not my favorite. You all know this. And that's very interesting because Aaron Rodgers was very high on Zach Wilson when he came out. And that would be, I mean, if Aaron Rodgers is willing to help coach up the young man, I mean, Zach Wilson has more than his fair share to learn. And Aaron Rodgers, just by being in the building, would be plenty for him to learn from. So with owner Woody Johnson already saying that the quarterback is the missing piece from this team, there's a couple of other pieces there, Woody, not just the quarterback, but we'll leave it there. And Nathaniel Hackett, already the offensive coordinator, he was the offensive coordinator with Aaron Rodgers from 2019 through 2021. And Aaron Rodgers has said nothing but good things about Nathaniel Hackett. You can kind of see where the Jets are coming from and kind of seeing, all right, that makes sense. Instead of going after trying to fish Tom Brady out of retirement or try to get like a Derek Carr or a, you know, what they would determine subpar for what they need. That's interesting to me. So we'll keep an eye on that one. Another one is the Raiders' Derek Carr is not waiving his no trade clause in his contract. So basically what that means is he visited the Saints, and it wasn't as good of a visit as both sides wanted. And so the Raiders went to him and said, hey, do you want to waive your no-trade clause so we can send you to New Orleans? And Derek Carr said, no. No. So that triggers a couple of things that need to happen before Wednesday of this week. First is we'll see if the Raiders do make a deal somewhere that Derek Carr wants to go. I don't know where that is. He doesn't have a list out there. But with that no-trade clause, it has to be somewhere he wants to go. And then the Raiders, on their end, would have to get, you know, whatever back that they deem acceptable. So Wednesday is the key day because that's the day that Derek Carr's contract, wow, that's kind of hard to say. Derek Carr's contract becomes fully guaranteed for next season. That's $40 million against the cap for the Raiders. If he is released before then, it will only trigger a $5 million clause in Derek Carr's contract, and so it's only a $5 million hit against the salary cap next year for Las Vegas. So Derek Carr's out of Vegas. We all knew this at the end of the season when he was benched, and then he left the team, all of this, that, and the other. And now we're going to see where he goes because he's going to be a free agent. I doubt there's a team that would want Derek Carr, and they know the situation, would pony up for a trade with the Raiders. Everybody in the league is playing chicken with the Raiders in this instance, and Derek Carr is playing chicken with the Raiders, saying, all right, you got two options here. Either you have me as your quarterback next year for $40 million, and you already don't like me, so you would bench me anyway, so you'd be paying me $40 million to be a backup, or you cut me, I still get some money at $5 million. There you go. Plus, with my wild offseason prediction for the Raiders, I'm looking at Dak Prescott going to Las Vegas. Las Vegas has a ton of draft capital this year. The Cowboys are all over Aaron Rodgers, just like the Jets are. And they have Mike McCarthy already. I mean, those two won a Super Bowl in Green Bay, and then neither of them have done much since. Well, I say not much, but Aaron Rodgers has won a couple of MVP awards. You know, not much. And that's a pretty spicy thing that could happen for Vegas. So we'll see what happens over this offseason. That's one of my more wild offseason predictions is Dak Prescott going from Dallas to Vegas. We'll see if it happens. I was kind of throwing darts in the dark, but, you know, it'd be cool if it happened. I could finally just hate the Cowboys through and through because I love Dak. I really do. Okay, so that is the second spicy thing. The third is that the Colts are again looking at an Eagles offensive coordinator to fill their vacant head coaching position. So, before the Super Bowl, the Colts have instructed basically everyone they've interviewed for their head coaching position that they're going in a different direction and that they're prepared to offer the position to Shane Steichen, the man whose name escaped me last week or 2 weeks ago when I was talking about the Eagles coaching staff. So the Colts are going to be hiring an offensive coordinator from the Eagles. Turnabout is fair play. The Eagles hired Nick Sirianni away from the Colts when he was their offensive coordinator to be their head coach. And then before that, the Colts hired Frank Reich, the offensive coordinator for the Doug Peterson-led Philadelphia Eagles, to fill the vacancy that was left last minute by Josh McDaniels after the Eagles won their Super Bowl. So, if you're keeping score here, I believe it's 2-1 in favor of Philadelphia over the Colts. And what I mean by that is Philadelphia has groomed coordinators well enough for Indianapolis to hire away two of them in the span of 5 years. Well then, why do that when Eric Bieniemy is right there? All Eric Bieniemy has done is coached a 2-time MVP, won 2 Super Bowls. I mean, give me a break. Why is that guy not a head coach? I don't know. Well, I mean, I do know, but I don't want to say it. But, maybe it has to do with, I don't know, the color of the jersey. All right, so that's a very interesting thing as well. Indianapolis is flailing around in the dark. They have a very talented roster, but the owner is kind of a loose cannon. Not in the way that, Al Davis used to be or that Jerry Jones is, but he's a loose cannon in his own right, and that's why the Colts have had so much dysfunction since Andrew Luck retired. So, Eagles offensive coordinator Shane Steichen is going to the Colts, presumably, allegedly, whatever you want me to throw in there. I think it's going to happen because of what I read in the story, that the Colts have already said to everybody else they've interviewed, we're going in a different direction. That kind of tells you, and they didn't contact him, and they can't tell him it's his job before the Super Bowl. They have to wait until after the Super Bowl. All right. So that's really the interesting stuff going on in the world of the NFL as we kick off, the off season. So as we move to a world without football, yes, the dark off season where we struggle to find any sort of light. We say goodbye to the season that was, and we say goodbye to my Super Bowl preseason picks of the Chargers and the 49ers. Man, I was really close with the 49ers. They were an injured quarterback away from going to the Super Bowl. As for the Chargers, it was a historic collapse that kept them from possibly challenging for a Super Bowl berth. Well. You win some, you lose some, right? I got the Chiefs right, So, there you go. All right, let's move on. Say farewell to this great season. This was a great NFL season. A lot of fun. Let's move it on. We're moving on to the NBA and the crazy trade deadline that was. So first, I'm going to do the blockbuster, and then I'll move on to the other stuff. So the blockbuster. The Brooklyn Nets traded Kevin Durant to the Phoenix Suns. Yeah, not Kyrie. We already knew about that one. I already talked about that one last week. Kevin Durant now leaves the Brooklyn Nets and goes to Phoenix to form a new big three, where it's Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, and Devin Booker, with DeAndre Ayton there as well. There you go. 4, so the Suns get Kevin Durant and TJ Warren to kind of make the math work out on the contracts and whatnot. 4, Cameron Johnson, a forward. Mikal Bridges, and everybody pronounces it differently, and I've never heard, the same thing like twice, so we'll go with both of them, Mikal and Mikal Bridges. Jay Crowder, who was then traded to Milwaukee in a 3-team deal involving the Pacers for 2 second-round picks. So the Nets got 2 second-round picks for Jay Crowder, and 4 first-round picks plus a 2028 first-round pick swap. So that's 5 first-round picks moving around there. That's a lot. That is the new owner of the Suns saying, we're not going to be spending like we're a small market anymore. We're going in. We've got the talent here. I want to win. And boy, is he going for it. Kevin Durant on the court is one of the most fun people to watch. It's just everything is so smooth with him. The moment is never too big for him. The game is never fast. It just feels like the game slows down for him. And he can make a shot from anywhere on the court. Nobody can actually guard him. Not even LeBron could guard Kevin Durant. That's how good offensively Kevin Durant is. And you put him alongside the most overrated point guard of all time, but he's still very good, in Chris Paul. The walking bucket that Devin Booker is, and a big man in DeAndre Ayton. The Suns are suddenly very scary in the West. Like, look out Denver. Phoenix is on line 1 about that number 1 seed. Holy moly. And the haul that the Nets got back, they can finally move on from the disasters that were the trades with the Boston Celtics that created the current state of the Celtics and the disaster that was the James Harden saga. By the way, that vaunted big 3 that everybody was so high on, everybody was already crowning them champions, of Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden. Do you know how many games they played together total? 16. Over, 3+ seasons? 16 total games. Those 3 guys were on the court at the same time. Due to injury and Kyrie Irving being Kyrie Irving. Yeah. So that worked out well, didn't it? So the Nets are moving on. They might be starting to build from scratch. We'll see what happens, what they do with those picks, because they've got cap space now as well. They do still have Ben Simmons, the man who can't shoot. And I don't know. We'll see we'll see what happens going forward with Brooklyn. Their season's going to bottom out. Like, it's going to bottom out. And then the Suns just vaulted themselves into the NBA Finals favorites overnight just by picking up a Hall of Famer in Kevin Durant. And a very good forward in TJ Warren. Like, he's pretty good himself coming off the bench there. So kudos to the Suns for going for it, for figuring, you know what, may as well go for it now. Now better now than never, right? And then for the Nets, I mean, they made the best out of a bad situation, right? Kyrie requested a trade before the season. He requested a trade last season at the trade deadline, and he requested a trade now. So yes, they got rid of that headache. And then they got, Kevin Durant did it a little bit better in season than he did in the offseason. And they just kind of, they had closed-door meetings saying, you know what, hey, I want out, and let's just do this the right way, get me out of here. And they went, all right, cool, let's do it. And they got a lot back. So they can start to rebuild there. So, I mean, I think both sides win this deal. I really do. It depends on how healthy Kevin Durant is for the rest of the way here. But as it stands, I think the Suns are a very real threat to win it all. I really do. If everybody can stay healthy. I'm looking at you, Chris Paul, and Kevin Durant in particular. All right, so let's move this along. Let's go to the Utah Jazz in that 3-team deal. And then I'll talk about the Jazz afterwards as well. So, in this 3-team deal involving Utah, the Lakers, and Minnesota again, the Jazz get Russell Westbrook, forward Juan Toscano Anderson, and center Damian Jones from the Lakers, all 3, and a 2027 first-round pick from Los Angeles. It's lightly protected, which means if that pick lands in numbers 1 through 4, the Lakers keep it, and then the pick is conveyed to be a second-round pick the year after. So unless the Lakers completely bottom out after LeBron leaves, that's a pretty darn good pick, because that's going to be lottery at the very least. So the Jazz also clear $60 million from their cap going into this offseason. Wow. All right, I'll talk about that here in a little bit in more detail. The Lakers The Lakers get guard D'Angelo Russell from Minnesota, and then from Utah, they got Malik Beasley and Jared Vanderbilt. So what did the Lakers get? Well, the two players from Utah are very good rotation guys that will be minute fillers and will be able to make an impact in the playoffs. Malik Beasley has shown that he's a very good three-point shooter and a very willing defender, which is what the Lakers need. And he'll be able to space the floor for LeBron and Anthony Davis. Jared Vanderbilt is a player they need as well. This guy will do anything you ask him to do. He will run through a brick wall for a coach that he likes. So, this is a dirty work player. He's going to dive for those loose balls. He's going to rebound, and he's going to play defense hard. So that's what they got from those two guys. What they got from D'Angelo Russell is not necessarily Russell Westbrook, but someone whose stats do not tell the full story. D'Angelo Russell just does not play defense. It's like James Harden with the Rockets. He just didn't care. He's not there to play defense. He's there to score points. That's D'Angelo Russell in a nutshell. So, I don't know how that's going to go over with one LeBron, but as the season wears on and we get into the postseason, if the Lakers make it, that might come to bear here in a little bit. And then as far as Minnesota, what they get two guards from Utah. So they get guard Mike Conley and his 2-year deal, and guard Nickeil Alexander-Walker that the Jazz were hoping they could develop, but the deal was not going to go anywhere unless they threw him in. So the Jazz did not want to let Nickeil go, but they had to get this deal done. And the Timberwolves get 3 second-round picks, I believe, from the Jazz in 24, 25, and 26. So the Timberwolves get the point guard that they've always wanted in Mike Conley. If Mike Conley can stay healthy, he will guide the Minnesota Timberwolves into the playoffs. He is a point guard that knows how to work very well with Rudy Gobert, and is a guy who can get a team to play the system that you want to play. Like, he's a floor general. So Mike Conley, great. Very classy on the way out of Utah. So he thanked not just the organization, but he thanked the fans and the state for welcoming him and his family, making it feel like home. It was a great farewell message on his Instagram. And, I wish him well in Minnesota. He was always good. Like, he never did anything wrong here. So, I wish you well. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a developmental prospect. I mean, Tony Jones has said a lot about him on The Athletic, and he just says he's a very athletic guy with he still needs some development to become a 3-and-D guy that comes off the bench. So he still needs some more development, which the Timberwolves need something on the bench. And so they'll get that from Alexander Walker. And then the 3 second-round picks, we'll see if those will be trade bait to try to get somebody else in or to unload an undesirable contract in the offseason. We'll see what happens there with those. So let's circle back to the Jazz. First glance, I hated this trade. Absolutely hated this trade. I thought the Jazz got fleeced. I thought they didn't get nearly enough back for what they gave up. And then I had a day to chew on it and stew on it, think about it a little bit more, and I love it. I love this trade. Yeah, sure, only 1 first-round pick and then 2, roster fillers till the end of the season in Juan Toscano Anderson and Damian Jones, and potentially a buyout in Russell Westbrook. So really, you didn't get really anything back as far as players are concerned. But then I read a couple of articles. I read articles from, I believe his name is Kevin McMahon on ESPN.com. And then obviously I read Tony Jones because I love Tony. And they really painted a very bright picture about what the Jazz were doing with this trade. So they got what they wanted from Mike Conley. He showed Colin Sexton the ropes. He showed him how to be a better professional, how to be, just more present with the team. They got what they wanted from Malik Beasley and Jared Vanderbilt in increasing their value so that they could ship them out in a deal. So they got what they wanted from those guys. And then the vision moving forward is what's key here. So yes, they get that first-round pick, lightly protected. If they don't get it, they don't get it, whatever. That was the key for the deal for the Jazz. But it wasn't everything. That wasn't the whole picture that they were painting. What Justin Zanuck, David Fizdale, and Danny Ainge, the 3 minds in the front office, were doing with this deal, and were doing basically from the start of the season, was how do we maximize what we have without breaking up the vision we have moving forward? Well, what that means is they got what they needed from these guys in the first half of the season. And so now what they've done is they shipped him out. They've got some sort of return for them. They got 2 guys back that won't challenge the rotation moving forward for playing time. And so they can see how this roster gels together. They can see how these different players develop throughout the rest of the season, because the ball they're going to be playing isn't tank ball. Like, they're going to be playing to try to get into that play-in scenario. Everything, being equal, I think they want to be playing for that up near towards the last, month and a half of the season, and then they just kind of fall into the lottery. But they want to see what they have. And they can't do that with veterans in front of the young guys. As I said at the start of the season, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, even Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Mike Conley were not long for this team. None of them were. I was surprised that Mike Conley lasted into the season. But just the brilliance of what that front office is doing on the surface, we'll see how this all plays out. Obviously, it's a lot of what-ifs and banking on the future, and that the talent development in Utah works out for some of these guys, and that their scouting department does their job. But just think for a second here about the future for the Jazz and how bright it actually is. There is only one team that holds more first-round picks than the Utah Jazz over the next 5 years, and that's the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Jazz are very well set up. I would say better than the Thunder, because the Thunder have a lot of young guys who have injuries. They don't really know how they work together. They've gone through coaching changes during this rebuild, so they don't really have a system together. The Jazz have a system. They know what they want to do. They have a front office that shares the same vision. There's no dissenting voices. So they have their number 2 guy in Lauri Markkanen. They have 2 very bright young players in Walker Kessler and Ochai Agbaji. They like what they've seen from Colin Sexton thus far and how he's grown up from his time in Cleveland and how he's ready to take on a bigger role. He's possibly the 6th man they need moving forward to fill the void that might be left by Jordan Clarkson. And so let's talk about Jordan Clarkson here. Let's talk about the flamethrower. As we got closer to the deadline, Jordan Clarkson's camp was sending up signals saying, we may not opt into that player opt-in for the 14 to 15 million in the offseason, but we're not saying we're not open to coming back. So that's very good. That means you can probably get Jordan Clarkson in the neighborhood of 18 to 20 million, I would think, unless some team comes in and just overbids the crud out of him. I mean, it's possible JC comes back for a couple of years. That's even more production off the bench. Or as a starter alongside somebody they draft. The future is so bright. And all of these fans, it's another thing that I saw here during the trade deadline day. I was monitoring Reddit because I don't really monitor Twitter anymore because duh. But on the Utah Jazz subreddit, fans are very emotional and very knee-jerk reactions. And I was too, initially. I didn't like the deal. But then I stewed on it. I thought about it. I had smarter people tell me why it was a good deal. And I listened. And then I looked into it myself. And I went, yeah, they're right. The fans, though, on the Jazz subreddit, holy Moses. You would think it was the end of the world. Though we got screwed. We got, the wool was pulled over our eyes. Danny the Trader just got duped to the nth degree. It's like you're looking very short term and you're looking at the surface. You're not digging deep. You're thinking about immediate returns here, and that's not what this season was ever about after they traded Rudy. This season was never about this year. This season was about the next 4 to 5 years, building out a team that will compete for an actual championship. Not to be in the championship conversation like the Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Mike Conley, Bojan Bogdanovic, Joe Ingles years were. They were in the conversation as one of the better teams in the league. That's great from where they came from. Now the conversation and why Danny Ainge was brought in by Ryan Smith and company is to change that conversation into, the Jazz are actual title threats, like the Celtics, Nuggets, Bucks, what have you. So, all of that being said, I love this deal. You just have to think about it for a second. You can't let your emotions take over what the Jazz, Danny Ainge, Justin Zanuck, David Fizdale have done. And there was an article written about David Fizdale earlier this season around, I want to say like November in The Athletic that I loved. And it was about or was it ESPN.com? It might have been ESPN.com, but it was one of those two. And it was about how everybody was confused why David Fizdale would leave coaching and go into a front office role. And forgive me, I cannot remember who wrote the article, so I want to give them credit. Just search David Fizdale on either The Athletic or ESPN.com, and you'll find the article. It's like the most recent one written about him. And it's because he wants to see the game from a different vantage point, so he went into the front office. And he's the voice of the head coach when the head coach can't be in the room. And so none of these moves are being made without the approval of somebody who's been a head coach. And Danny Ainge has been a head coach too. Not very successfully, but he was a head coach for a little bit. So they know how this is going to affect Will Hardy and the coaching staff long term. And so they tell Will Hardy and company and crew, we're not doing this unless you're at least a little bit on board. We're not going to pull the trigger just because we like it. We want to make sure you're there too. And so Will Hardy is in on it because of David Fizdale. So I love that. That was brilliant hiring in the front office by Ryan Smith and Justin Zanuck. I approve 100%. Like, I want to give Justin Zanuck more credit than he's actually getting because it's Danny Ainge is the face, right? He's Trader Ainge, Trader Danny. He's going to get his. He's going to be patient. Well, he's not the only guy in the room. He's not the actual general manager. That's Justin Zanuck. So let's give this guy a little credit too. From turning around a near hopeless situation at the end of last year, where the Jazz had most definitely plateaued and started sliding downwards, into one of the brightest futures in the league if they handle it properly, which Danny Ainge has a track record of doing so with the Celtics. You know, this team, Jason Tatum and company out there in Boston right now, was built by Danny Ainge. So you would only assume that he could do the same thing here in Utah. So there we go. Those are the two trades I was going to talk about today. I think every team won in one fashion or another. The Lakers got away from Russell Westbrook. The Timberwolves got the point guard they always wanted. And the Jazz got another first-round pick to add to their treasure trove. But the real key here is the cap flexibility moving forward. That's the real winner for the Jazz in this one. And the minutes being freed up for the younger guys to come on and play a little bit more to prove their chops. And prove they belong in the NBA. Not necessarily for the Jazz, but that they prove they belong in the NBA. So a win for a lot of people this trade deadline. And then for the Suns and the Nets, I think both sides won that as well. The Nets get to hit the reset button a little bit early. Instead of getting to the offseason this year, they kind of do it at, right now at the trade deadline. And so they can kind of gauge and kind of map out what they're going to do without having to kowtow to superstars. So that's very good. And the Suns, forget the superstar they've always wanted since Charles Barkley retired. They got him. Now they just need to go out and win a ring. Okay, so that's really it for the show this week. Not much on the video game front. I did pick up a Switch OLED. As of this recording, I came this morning, so I haven't really had a chance to play it too much. But what I can tell you about it is that I love it. The screen is night and day difference than the Switch I had. The Switch I had was basically the launch version. It's a very old Switch. So this new one's great. And the audio on it is better too. I don't know if that's actually true or if I'm just imagining things, but I think the audio on this OLED Switch is better than the old one I have. So there is a win there as well. As for what I've been playing, I have just, today, I've had a busy day. As of today, I beat Final Fantasy II. So I've beaten the first two Final Fantasies. I'll be starting Final Fantasy III soon. I've got some stuff I need to do this week for the podcast, so we'll see if I'll have time. But I've also been playing a lot of Valheim. That game has me, hook, line, and sinker. I love it to death. And that's really what I've been playing. And some Pokemon. I always have a Pokemon game going somewhere. So that's really what I've been up to. We've got Tears of the Kingdom coming up here pretty soon for Legend of Zelda, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. I did talk about it and whine about it a little bit last week for being pushed back. That's coming out here in April. We've got Diablo 4 coming out in June. So there is some stuff going on, but we are in that little lull period. And the last thing I want to say this week is Double Lift is proving the dearth of talent in North America. The dude hasn't played competitively for 2 years. He comes into the league, and the one game I saw, he finished with a scoreline of some crazy, 12, I think it was like 12, 2, and 3 or something like that. 12 kills, 2 deaths, 3 assists, something in that neighborhood. And he out CS'd his opponent by like almost 100. Yeah, the NALCS is in a lot of trouble if a guy who's been retired for 2 years can just step right in and be the second best ADC in the league. Oh, boy. All right, and that's the show this week, everybody. Starting next week, I will be talking a lot more about basketball. I will be talking more about baseball because pitchers and catchers report this week. Hey, woo! So we'll have baseball talk coming up. And some more, for my European friends, some more football. Talk about how Arsenal is collapsing in on itself like a dying star, and I'm very nervous about it. Their lack of depth is definitely showing. But, that's for next week and beyond. So thank you all so much for listening. I appreciate you all. As always, rate, review, share this show with everybody and anybody. And I will see you all next week when we spelunk back into the Matt Cave. BYU never won in Spokane, Washington against Gonzaga in the Kennel. I thought they were going to do it this week. I really did. They were really close.